For me, a teacher has a really big impact on how I feel about a subject. If I like the teacher, I often become the best student in the class. On the flip side, if I don't like the teacher, their teaching styles just doesn't click with me, it can make me dislike the subject completely. After analyzing over 50 classes and more than 4,000 pages of notes, I discovered that whether my notes are effective or useful really depends on the teachers. Hi, my name is Han. I'm an engineering grad from Columbia University. I've been through phases where I blame the teacher for not giving us proper notes or doing a bad job of explaining things. But you know what? Such is life. Don't complain about things that you cannot change. When a teacher's style don't quite match with your learning style, take it as an opportunity to grow and learn in a different way. There is this concept called managing up in workplace, in which instead of just letting your boss one-way manage you, you actively understand your boss's management, leadership, and communication styles. Then you adapt how you interact with them to help you succeed in your job. I believe a similar idea can apply to students, so I came up with the concept of learning up. You can learn about your teacher's style, adjust your studying method based on what kind of teachers you have, and manage your interactions with them to help you succeed academically. In this video, I'm gonna share with you how I take effective notes based on my method of learning up. Let's get into it. Before we dive into discussing different teacher types, let's talk about what's the purpose of taking notes and what makes them truly effective. First, it helped me concentrate in class. Many studies show that the act of handwriting increases retention and making it easier to memorize and comprehend the material. Secondly, I see notes as effective study materials to review later. Some of my notes are extremely helpful and highly effective for reviewing, but there are also notes that I never look at a single page after the class ends. So in my opinion, for notes to be considered a good and effective studying material that I can review later, it needs to satisfy a couple criteria. First, I can find what I'm looking for very quickly. If I just want to find a single definition and it took forever for me to find it in the notes, then the notes is not doing its job. It might be faster for me to find the information online. Second, they should indicate the different levels of importance for different content. Because if your notes just have a bunch of information without knowing which are more important than the others, it's like reading 1,000 pages of textbook. I cannot consume all the information. Third, the notes should also include my own thoughts and questions. If I take time to take the notes, I need them to be personalized to me. Otherwise, I can just use someone else's pre-made notes to save time. Now let's talk about how to take notes in class depends on different type of teachers. Based on my experience, there are 4 different teaching styles. If the teacher provides slides before class, you should prepare them beforehand. If you use an iPad, just download them to your note-taking app. If not, just print out the slides and bring them to the class. During the lecture, all the important information are probably already on the slides, so just annotate your own thoughts or any questions on the slide. The most challenging part of this method is reviewing, because there's probably lots of information on the slides. There can be 5 pictures in a row on 5 different slides, and it's completely useless for reviewing later. I often have 100 pages of slides just in one class. So focus on using some sort of system to mark the different importance levels of different content to narrow down the scope that you need to review later. I usually divide all the materials into 3 different levels. I use 2 different highlight methods to indicate the most important and the secondaries, and I leave the rest unmarked as things that are nice to know and that can help me understand better. I explain more about how to evaluate the importance level of the material in this How I Learn Faster video right here if you haven't watched it. When I say highlight, it doesn't necessarily mean highlighter pens. It could be any method that distinguish one to another. It can be circling, underlining, or draw a flower. Whichever works best for you. For instance, I use a yellow highlighter and a star next to it to mark the most important. And I use the yellow highlight alone to mark the secondary importance. It's important to know that as the content becomes more crucial, the volume of highlighting should actually decrease, because by nature there should be always less important information than the unimportant details. So if you found yourself highlighting more important than the non-important thing, you should reevaluate. way. If you highlight everything, you highlight nothing. Because the slides probably have so many pages, put a mark on the pages that you think are the most important. On the iPad, you can mark your favorite pages. For physical notes, you can just put a tag or even just fold a corner. This way, when you try to go back and review your slides, you won't be overwhelmed by the amount of information there is. You can just review the ones that I marked and highlighted. If a teacher teaches by writing notes on the board, just write down everything they write. Their notes are typically well structured and follow outlines and chapters, so it should be quite convenient for you to locate the detailed content when reviewing based on the outline your teacher structured. It can be a chapter, then a subchapter, and all the details in it. Also, you should mark what are more important material than the others using some sort of a system, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Third, you should write down all your thoughts and questions when needed. You can use the Cornell note-taking system to write down all your thoughts and questions in a different section. But if you feel like you don't have a lot of thoughts or questions, simply just use a different color pen to mark them in your notes. That's what I do sometimes. I usually use a red pen to write my thoughts next to the content, and I draw a circle on it if I don't understand it. Since they're writing as they teach, it's probably very easy for you to follow their pace throughout the lecture. And these type of teacher usually emphasize the process of deviation. They want to show you the logic behind each step instead of just show you the conclusion directly. If the teacher doesn't provide slides in advance, so you don't have any slide to annotate on because it can be very hard to keep up with the speed of switching the slides, and you also need to find a balance between listening to the lecture and writing down the notes. Don't try to write down everything on the slide. Only write the most important information. Here is a couple tips that help me identify what to write down. 1. Focus on building a structure and outlines. This will help you have a more structured way of reviewing or filling in the details later. 2. Obviously, write down when the teacher emphasizes that something is more important or when they spend more time and more examples explaining. 3. Don't write the entire sentence. Use a couple of words to summarize or trigger your memorization. For example, instead of writing the whole example, just write the pineapple example. 4. As a general rule, definitions are more important than the applications and then the examples. If the teacher doesn't use any slides or write anything on the board, they just talk, or even worse, they're just disorganized. They simply want to discuss whatever they feel like discussing. This becomes very tricky because you don't have any materials or structures to follow. Then if you lose focus just even 1 second, then you're completely lost. So my suggestion would be this: even if they're somewhat disorganized and they just want to talk about whatever they want to talk about in class, there's still a material that they are using it as a reference in a higher level. Identify the source or the material that they're using as the reference, probably the textbook or a syllabus. Then use that as your guide. Preview the material before the class and then jot down the outline and structures. Then in class, identify which part of the material the teacher is discussing at the moment and fill in the details in the structure. Also, I think this type of teacher usually very values engagement in the class. They probably want to have a discussion with you. They want you to ask questions and challenge them even. So maybe don't push yourself too hard and focus too much on taking notes. Use this as an opportunity to be more engaged in class and practice your active listening and critical thinking. Leave a comment down below if you experienced other teaching styles and share your tips about taking notes. Thank you so much for watching. Love ya!